Hey Nick, man, how you doing?
Hey Rob, it's been a long time now. It's great to see you. Wish we'd been catching up more often in the last couple of years, but this is fun to get on here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I can't wait. I really appreciate the fact that you're joining us for the Myers Mile. I know you're gonna have like a lot of great content and stuff that you can add to all these young athletes and really help them out. So I really appreciate it. Just so you know that, and you've always been like such a great inspiration, not just to me but to so many people. And what's special about you is not just Americans, but New Zealanders and just kind of all over the world, if I had to really say. So that's kind of the neat thing, and really special. What's really special about this interview? So I'm going to kind of roll into it, man. Let's just start off with your bio. Why don't you let people know a little bit about your background? Kind of your running career, highs, lows, and well, let's start off with the highs, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. I'm 37 years old, or 37 years young. I've got a more grays than normal color here going now, but I got into track probably when I was 4 or 5 years old and been running races ever since I was a little tacker running around, but I didn't really get into training until I was about 16 years of age. That's when I probably went for my first real run and had some great experiences. The three highs that really stand out for me, the first ever time I raced overseas as a young kid from New Zealand, I was 17, headed off to Australia, and I went in against the top Australians and South Africans in the Pacific Schools Games there, and I remember standing on that start line, and I was the most nervous I've ever been in my running career, more than any Olympic final or anything, and wasn't sure how it was going to go. 300 meters into the 800-meter race, we came into the home straight, and someone stood on the back of my shoe, and the heel of my spike tucked under my heel. So I was like, gosh, what am I going to do? My shoe's only half on. So in that moment, I flicked the spike up in the air. And if you watch the video, it goes sort of top over tail and flying in the air over the back of the pack. And then instinct, I guess, took over. And I went from being in about sixth position and I sprinted up into the shoulder of the leader. And as I got up onto his shoulder, he's like, who's this Kiwi behind me? He was an Australian, and he took off, and I followed him around. And after a 56-second first lap, we just picked up the pace even more, and I managed to dig even deeper down the home straight and win that race in a 3-second PR and 151 at the time. And that was sort of my eyes opening that what was potentially possible for my career. Before that, I thought maybe I could be a big fish in a little pond, but I never thought I could be competitive in a big pond, and that rates up there with the two Olympic medals that I've won at Beijing and then Rio, which are the other two super memorable events. But it's all relative to your perspective and experience at the time, and my emotions were just as heightened, and the intensity of that moment was just as real or raw as any Olympic final or World Champs final I've ever been in. And I think I've benefited from that experience and many of the other races, whether it be World Juniors or NCAA races along the way, have always fed off of that moment that when the going got tough, my shoe got knocked off and all that sort of stuff, and I had to run three-quarters of the race in one sock and one spike. I've sort of reverted back to that memory that I've always told myself to stay cool and collected when the pressure gets heaped on, and that's sort of carried over in many of the important moments. Not always, but yeah, that's a real sort of stake in the ground moment of my career.
So that was the projection, the projected you to everything else, kind of that moment.
Yeah, it really made me own running as my sport. It sort of helped me own running as my identity up to that point. That was the very start of my senior year. So I was like the early fall of my senior year in high school. And up to that point, I was still playing multiple sports. I was still hanging around with my skateboarding crew, and running was something I did and I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't my focus of my life, and probably was a good thing that it wasn't. But that really sort of made me realize what was possible if I really dedicated myself, and it gave me permission, I suppose, to justify being sort of intense and making sacrifices and skipping going to certain school events because I had training sessions going on or different things, because I had the evidence that I'd won a big race. So my peers accepted that I wouldn't always be able to say yes to when they were going to the beach or going to the skate park and that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, ever since that moment, I guess that was the year 2000 in May. And what are we now, 2020 in June? So it's 20 years that I've really owned running as my identity, and it's been my number one focus of my personal pursuits.
Yeah, and that was a question I was going to ask you is, a little bit about your longevity, and we'll get to that later. But 20 years, I mean, that's amazing. You went to University of Michigan, NCAA titles.
I managed to only win. When I say only, it's
Only.
that is still a very challenging achievement. But I won one indoor mile championship, and I was a part of one winning relay squad. I had a couple of indoor second place results indoors, and in my freshman year outdoors, I got tripped up 2 laps into the 1500-meter race. So relative to my professional career, my NCAA career, although there were many high points, I wasn't by any stretch of the imagination a prolific winner of NCAA titles like many other of the great NCAA runners. But I sort of always tried to use the college season as a leapfrog to the summer season afterwards as well. And I really tried to focus on over distance races. Indoors, I would run the 3K or the 5K, and outdoors, I would do the 5K and the 1500 as well, and focused more on my middle distance focus is the 8:15 once the summer came around.
Yeah, and I think I would trade an Olympic medal for an NCAA medal any day, and which leads me into my next question. I've had the privilege and honor of standing on the podium for the Olympic trials, and to me that was an amazing moment, and I'll never forget that emotion. You have had the opportunity, well, privilege, honor, hard work, whatever it's taken to get there, but you have stood on the podium at the Olympic Games. You're a two-time Olympic medalist. What does that feel like?
Yeah, that's the most satisfying experience of all of the running. Like, the race itself is really cool, but there's nothing worse than finishing a race. What you built up all of the 4 years leading up to it. Let's face it, we as professional athletes, we're focused on the Olympics 4-year cycle. So everything up to that point is a stepping stone towards the Olympics. But once you finally finish your final race at the Olympics, you don't want it to end. You want it to keep that experience to go on and on. But if you don't make the top 3, then it's off to the locker room, grab a bag and head home, But when you finally, like, I've been to 4 Olympics, so I know what the experience is on both sides of that. And the 2 times that I did get in the top 3, it just extends that celebration. But then, so it's fun to experience that. But then when you actually step on, that's when it hits you that everyone from your nation back home is watching on TV, and like that's a proudful or proud moment. Let's try and get this right, Nick. It's a prideful moment for everyone back home in New Zealand, and so yeah, it's you're sharing that experience with your fellow New Zealanders and compatriots. The one really cool and unique experience that I've gotten to, that very, very few others have, and I'm very, very fortunate in that regard, is that I actually got to receive my Beijing medal twice. So the first time was the bronze medal within the Olympic Stadium, but then when the winner tested positive and was disqualified, and 8 months later, and I was upgraded to the silver medal, the New Zealand Olympic Federation organized another medal ceremony in my home track in New Zealand, in the town that I did all my races since I was 4 years old. And so we had about 4,000 people at the stadium that day. And although I was only a silver medalist, they played the New Zealand national anthem. So I'm the only person to receive the national anthem for
For a medal.
getting the silver medal. So that was really special, and because then you're really experiencing it with all your nearest and dearest. They were all there with me, and I will savor that. And there were a lot of tears shed that afternoon at Newtown Park in Wellington. So that was very, very special.
I bet. And I can only imagine the thought of all of that hard work kind of paying off, crossing your mind when you're up there. You know, it's just like, boom.
Yeah, just all of the memories flood back. It's not just the running hard work, but it's all of the what ifs come flooding back into your mind. What if this had happened? Then I would have never got there. The time I got hit by a car when I was 11 and was 2 weeks in a hospital. What if the slight angle had been different and I'd been something damaged that I could never run again, sort of thing. All of the people that helped me along the way, all of those memories came flooding back. My mother passed away when I was a little kid, so all of the different women in my life who played that mothering role and helped me get to that point, and all the coaches and all the training partners and all the friends, and yeah, that was very, very special.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What was your training like? You know, that's a big question. You know, everyone's got, there's so many different ways. What's training like for you? You know, high school, maybe touch just a little, but after that, for sure.
Yeah, in high school, as I said, I didn't really start training properly until I was sort of at the second half of my junior year. My freshman and sophomore year equivalents, we do it a slightly different way in New Zealand, but I'll use the translation to American language. My freshman and sophomore years, I would do 2 track workouts a week, and during the track season, and that'd normally be like 8 300s and 10 200s. That's pretty standard for my Monday, Wednesday workout. And then on the Saturday, I'd always have a race at the open track meets, and I would do a sprint race and the middle distance race. So I'd either do a 100 and 800 or a 200 and a 1500, and maybe a 4x4 relay as well. So always working on practicing the explosive speed, but also practicing race tactics. And these open meets are often against adults or mixed gender races and all that sort of stuff. So it's just, you line up with people of your ability. So that was pretty standard for me, 14, 15. But on the other days, I didn't do any other running. I would go to going to the golf course or rugby practice or tennis practice or that sort of stuff. So I don't know if I really could equate that I ran any mileage. I was just I was like a middle distance runner doing 400-meter training basically. But every single day at school, we were playing touch rugby, basketball. I was probably doing 2 or 3 hours of dynamic and explosive exercise every single day, apart from running, because that was just what me and my buddies did. We were always taking part in sort of pick-up sports. And then 16, 17 years of age, I started running sort of 4, 5, 6 days a week, and I might go for 20-minute runs the first 6 months, and then that would get to 40-minute runs, and then that still didn't really translate to results in cross country. I was 83rd in my national high school cross country champs, which is the equivalent of like a smaller state meet in America. It was 4 million people in New Zealand, so it's like a state meet, and I was 83rd. And in my senior year, I decided to finally do some real training, and I finally ramped up to 50 kilometers a week. So that's like 32 miles a week, you know. And I finished third at our national cross country meet, and that went well. And so I then got the bug, and I started training more and more, and I got up to 50 miles a week by the end of my senior year. And I was really owning running as my identity. And I remember going for a run. I did like an hour 25 run, and I ran home at the end, and I saw a buddy from school, and I yelled out, "I just ran for 85 minutes." Like, I couldn't believe that it was possible for someone to run that far, you know. But that was right at the end of my high school year. And I think I ran a 1550 road 5K. Yesterday I ran with a freshman kid from Michigan who ran 1540 in cross country as a freshman. And yeah, I was stoked with a 1550 as a senior in high school on the road, not in cross country. So yeah, my endurance wasn't really established, but I had pretty good raw speed, and I ran a 23.4 200 out of the blocks my senior year in high school. And then, so yeah, from there on, my speed never really improved, but I slowly increased my mileage and the focus of doing more cross country type training. And when I got to America, they got me up to about 65 miles a week, and I was doing mile repeats and tempo runs, all the stuff I'd never done before. And I learned to become a distance runner. And slowly and surely, my freshman year, I went from being sort of the 9th or 10th guy on the team to eventually finishing 28th at the NCAA cross country champs that year. So each week I was improving probably 20 seconds over the 8K distance. And so I finally found my hold as a distance runner who ran the mile, as opposed to being a sprinter who ran the mile, as opposed to a sprinter who ran the mile. And ever since then, I've sort of stuck to that philosophy of doing moderate mileage, like not crazy high mileage, but a lot of threshold, a lot of cross country type of workouts. And I've always run sort of between 55 and 90 miles a week at different times of the year and different stages of health. That's obviously a big thing, but there's always lots of tempo running, always lots of hill intervals, and lots of things where I'm sort of pleasantly fatigued, or as my coach calls it, a toothache, where it's hurting, but you can still keep going. A lot of that sort of training within that time. So that's been the nuts and bolts of my training over the years. And I always like to put on my spikes at least once a week and do some all-out sprinting stuff to tap into what I had in my youth, that sprint speed. And I'll do 60s or 80s or 120-meter sprints. And even at 37, I'm still able to dip under 12 seconds for 100. So that's keeping me going. And I think a big part of that is the fact that I've never had any Achilles injuries. That seems to be something that really impacts people's top end speed once they lose that spring from their Achilles. So I've been very, very fortunate in that regard.
That was my problem, my Achilles. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
Your Achilles with your Achilles heel.
Yeah, it was my Achilles heel. So, but yeah, I'm glad you touched on the fact that you still do the sprint work. And I know Ronnie, I was going to have a loaded question because I know Ron always had you guys do like we did the all out 150s or sometimes the all out ones. And, you know, with our training now and the training we gave some of these athletes was either flying 30s or 150s, different things like that, depending on what they followed. But so it's good to know that, hey, you know, that is still important. You know, you're a miler. Yeah, you're coming from that strength side, but you agree you do still need that top end speed, right? So
I think the top end speed's not only helpful for performance, but I think it's really helpful for injury prevention. If you're exposing your body to all of the different ranges of motion that your body's capable of, when you're suddenly thrown into a random situation, like you're crossing a street and a car's coming, you got to turn on the jets. It's not foreign to you. Your body's already accustomed to doing that. So it's like if you go to pick up a heavy weight, you'll strain your back if you haven't been doing those similar type of exercises in normal life as well. So a lot of the reason why I do a lot of my strength and conditioning or sprint work, all that sort of stuff, is to prevent my body from that random occurrence when you're picking a suitcase out of a bag or throwing it in your car from the airport, or when you have to suddenly run away from a dog or something like that. That's when injuries happen if you're not ready for it.
yeah, I would actually completely agree with that. That's so any importance on hill work, like hill repeats? You know, that's some kind of that's a type of speed. You do still do a lot of that? I know we did some with Ronnie.
I do more of it now than I used to in terms of the raw speed stuff. Rather than being on a flat for my sprints, we'll do 10-second hill sprints, all out top speed. I think that's really good for especially earlier in the season when you haven't gotten your top speed up. It's a way to get the similar effect without the injury risks, so long as you don't have Achilles issues going on. You sort of start getting the fast twitch fibers activated, and then from there you can transition onto the track. And then the same for longer reps. You can really get yourself pretty stuffed and tired, but you recover really quick. You think you're really exhausted, but you're not really going and digging into the well as deep as you would otherwise. So I think it's a safer way to, when you're not as fit, to get some of those harder workouts going without sort of doing irreparable damage to your cardiovascular system.
Perfect. Yeah, man. Hills was always kind of one of the things I loved. I mean, I loved hill repeats. We did a lot of them, almost once a week. It seemed like. So let's kind of switch to racing. Um, you know, anyone who's watched you race time and time again, you're very, very race savvy. Uh, Sometimes almost on the line of it looks reckless. You know, I mean, like if you're watching, you know, I know why I watched you. I think in the Olympics or something. I don't remember, but I'm sitting in my chair and I'm going, oh, don't get boxed in. Come on, come on. What do you know what I mean? And you have this natural ability to sneak your way through, stay calm, collected, confident, and just work your way up. And a lot of times, even on that inside line, which is you're a lot of people, a lot of coaches are always going to say, stay off that inside line, especially towards the end. You know, can you walk us through kind of your race strategy and the confidence it takes to be able to do that? I know you're 6 foot tall. Maybe that was my problem. I'm not tall enough, but you know, it seemed like you could just see the path. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's interesting that you chose the word reckless. I thought you were going to say too cautious or too passive. And I
It's a
think
weird kind of reckless, you
I
know?
err, yeah, I think I err on the side of being too scared or too afraid to be aggressive in a race. A lot of it stems back to the World Junior Championships in Kingston, Jamaica. I was 19 years old before I came to college. When you go to World Junior Championships, especially back then, you have no idea who your competition is. Everybody's coming in. They're the best kids in the world, but you have no idea what their credentials were, especially back then. And so you don't know how to race, like who's going to be the one to watch. And my coach said in the first round, just get on the shoulder of the leader after the first 100 meters and stay on the shoulder of whoever's leading, and then finish top three. And they were surging and different guys were going to the front, and I was always covering every single move, and I was in that perfect position, right? One
Mm-hmm.
out, one back. But then suddenly with 100 meters to go, when everyone kicked, I had nothing, and I barely made the final, and I crossed the finish line, and I like collapsed on the ground, and I was um, in a very, very bad state. It was crazy hot in Jamaica, and it took me about 3 hours for them to sort of get me back to myself again. And they were going to get me on an IV drip because I was sort of heat exhaustion and all of that sort of stuff, because I hadn't conserved my energy in the race at all. And so the next 2 days they loaded me up on electrolytes, and I didn't want to even run in the final. My body was in such bad state, and I was terrified of that happening again. So when the final came around and I decided I was going to race, I thought, I'm just going to have fun. Usain Bolt's here. There's 40,000 people, crazy Jamaicans in the crowd cheering for, going crazy for Usain Bolt. Like, I'm just going to have fun, and I just want to finish the race and not die. And I ran in last the whole first 3 laps, and then suddenly I wasn't even tired. And then when the field opened up, I managed to have a big sprint the last lap, and I ran a 53-second last lap, and I finished fourth at the World Juniors. And so, for better or for worse, that has always stayed with me. So that has also been my bane at the same time, because now it's like hard to get out of that pattern where
Yeah.
I don't want to make those aggressive or calculated moves. And so there are times that it's really worked out for me. Olympic finals, I think it's been really helpful, because a lot of my Olympics are the most high pressure moment, and a lot of people overdo their training in the leading months, or the stress of the occasion gets to them. And so I guess being more cool and calm and collected has paid off for me in those situations. But I haven't produced the same results at the World Championships or in Diamond Leagues, when there's a lot less pressure on the moment, and those who are willing to take more risks perhaps are rewarded a little more. So there's a give and take with it as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree, because you talked about that upper part, like second, third, fourth, that endless cyclone of athletes trying to get back into that second position where they think is that perfect position. And, you know, for me, that was kind of that, if I could get there and stay smooth, you're right, then I can have a great race because I'm in position. But I've also been on that other side of it, like you're talking about, where you just run circles and wear yourself out fighting with people. So
And
And I
so
think,
indoors, I've always enjoyed getting into that second or third position because there's only 6 or 7 guys in the race, and
yep.
especially in the pacemate races, it's pretty set up. But in the outdoor race, when you got 12 guys are all really high caliber,
Hmm.
that's when everyone wants to be in that same position, it ends up being a cluster, and it's much harder to do that. So I'd rather be in the back and then move into position rather than be in position fighting everybody as they are trying to overtake you, and then you end up often getting drifted back to the back in the end anyway. So it's like, well, I may as well have not fought for that. I may as well have saved my energy and then wait at the end to move my way up. So you really have to evaluate the different circumstances to make your decision how to race.
But it does seem like you move up on the inside a lot versus on the outside. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, that tendency is to go wide, right? It seems like a
I
lot of
I
times
have
you're able to just see that path.
I have a real difficult time justifying running more than 1,500 meters or more than a mile. If I watch a race and I've been out in lane 2 for a lap or two, then I always think, wow, I would have run 2 or 3 seconds faster if I'd run on the rail, because that's an extra 15 meters that you're covering overall. I know where the different stagger lines are on a track because I used to run the 200 and 400 meters as an open race, and they always give the people in the outside lanes a stagger, right? So that's the difference that you're running if you are in those lanes during a middle distance race as well.
Yeah, yeah, good point. So you've had a crazy long career. You're still going. What's, like if you had like a secret, or I don't know if it's like a secret, but what's the key to that? Like, how have you been able to keep going all this time?
I
Is
think
there a
there
key, or do you think this is just
there are
luck?
several factors. I think the first is the main reason what I love about running is getting out into the trails. It's my escape from the world, from technology, from all of that sort of stuff. It's when I'm injured, I really realize how much I need that daily just escape. And I enjoy just jogging in the woods. I don't enjoy going on the roads. I don't enjoy dirt roads. I like getting on single track trails under the trees or up on mountains, and so I make every effort to do that, and that's my place of recharge. It just so happens that that's also, in my opinion, the fundamental way to build the foundations of fitness. And so if that gets you 85% of the way, okay, now that I am really fit, it might be fun to jump on the track or the hills and do some workouts. And so even when I'm not that motivated, the stuff that I do enjoy doing in my daily routine is that stuff. It takes care of a lot of it. And I think that that's a big factor. I think I've been fortunate, and this might sound funny, but I've been fortunate that I've had quite a few significant injuries during my career. I've had four injuries that have required surgery. I've had 2 knee surgeries, 1 hip, and 1 hernia surgery. I've had about 4 stress fractures in my lower limbs, fibula and tibia and femur, and I've had a couple of pulled muscles. Um, what I mean by fortunate is that all of those injuries were ones where there was a pretty clear cut resolve to them. It was surgery or it was a stress fracture, just take 3 months rest. But there was a clear cut protocol with how one rehabs those, and then there's light at the end of the tunnel. So you go through the stages of grieving. You get really angry, you get in denial, you get sad, you deal with all that frustration, then you accept it, and then you say, okay, I can manage this. I'm going to set new goals now within my rehab protocol, and you try and crush the rehab, and you get really strong in all the other areas of your body. And you and I've also been surrounded by really supportive and loving people in my team, the same team through all of this. My wife, my coaches, my physios, my doctor, and my PT and my massage therapist. They're all one family. We all know each other, and they've held my hand through all of that process each time, and I've been around great people. But then when you also I've probably missed probably 2.5 years of total running, being out of action. That's less time I've spent on my legs, but it's also a mental and physical break from the wear and tear that you put on your body if you're really training up to that red line year in, year out, year in, year out. I don't I envy their careers, but I also think I benefited from having different careers than the guys like Craig Mottram and Alan Webb or Chris Selinsky, guys who were able to push the limit in training for about 10 years, and they reached unbelievable heights in their career. Whereas mine's sort of been a gradual, slow improvement, and I've reached my peaks in my early to mid 30s because I wasn't able to ever put in that crazy training because there were always injuries that held me back. But it also enabled my body to still be fresh into my 30s as opposed to worn out and burnt out.
So maybe out of that, would you say, some advice would be maybe make sure that when it is time for your rest, you actually take that rest?
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I'm always a big believer, like there's always another race. I've always been a big believer. When you're injured, focus on what the proper protocol is with that injury. And a lot of that is emotional. Don't just think, okay, I'm injured now, I've got to suddenly hit the bike or the pool and cross train. It's like, what will help this injury heal the best? And normally that includes complete rest for the initial 7 or 10 days or 2 weeks. Let it fully start the healing process. And then moderate cross training is actually helpful to a point, so long as you're not like depleting your body's healing resources. And then you need to slowly build up the fitness so that when you do start training again, you're not starting from scratch. And then once you've gone through all of those phases, then you want to go through the proper phases in regular building up of fitness. And once you're up to 90% fitness, then you can look at the calendar and think, okay, what races should I target? But if you're always thinking, oh no, I got injured, but I've got the state meet, or I've got the conference meet, or if I've got nationals coming up, I've got to find a way to make my body be ready for that. More often than not, you're just going to repeat that injury cycle, and then it's going to happen for the next conference meet or state meet or national championships, and you stay on this treadmill of injuries, and you're never able to fully get healthy. And the best way to stay healthy is to be healthy. The best way to prevent injury is to already be healthy. So you want to get your body fully healthy, and then each week that you're healthy, you're more likely to stay healthy as well. And the best way to get to your very peak possible potential is to be healthy for a good 2 or 3 years of consistent training. So that should be the primary goal, in my opinion.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, definitely well
And that's
said.
hard when you're a high school kid or a college kid to think along those lines. But for you kids listening, if you're 16 or 17, you could have 20 more years at the highest possible level. I'm much faster now at 37 than I was when I was 17. So it's not a rush. Like, you got to be patient through all of this.
But I think like the problem with our US, I don't know, New Zealand, but in the US, the high schoolers, to get a college opportunity, a lot of times they feel like there is that pressure. There is that short window of, hey, you got to get this done or you won't get the opportunity. I mean, what kind of advice can you, how would you tell them to handle that,
Well, that is hard, and there is a window of opportunity, but I actually do believe that if you go through the proper phases properly, you often also end up performing better yourself for the short term, even though you're aiming for the long term. Because if you skip all the different development phases, going into your like sharpening phase of training when you haven't done all the phases of preparation, that will run out of steam really quickly anyway. Whereas if you're not thinking short term, you're thinking the long term, often you end up coming around a lot quicker than planned anyway. The other extra alternative option, I guess, is there an immediate rush to go straight into college right after your senior year? Like, a gap year may not be what you want to do, but it might be something that could give you that extra year to work on your training and your times, and show college coaches that you're able to be self-motivated, and you can, if you didn't run really well your junior year, that means it gives you a whole senior year of high school plus the fall and winter of your gap year could be a potential option as well. I personally didn't come to college until a year and a half after I finished high school, and I think I really benefited from arriving on campus in the dorms as a freshman, as a 19-year-old man. I had experienced the world. I'd traveled around and I'd done a lot of things, so that I didn't need to sort of follow the peer pressures of my my peers. I was able to be my own man and still enjoy the camaraderie of my friends, but I didn't need to follow what was going on that day or that night. I was there for a reason. It was to be the best student athlete I could be.
I really hope everyone listens to what you just said, because that's a very foreign concept in the United States. You don't. It's almost like if you don't go to college to compete as a freshman, well, then you're just not going to college to compete, right? That's that. It's almost like finite, and it's not. And I think if people would actually just listen to that and say, hey, you know what? Maybe if I don't make it my senior year, I don't qualify for my freshman year of college, I can still go to college and like you said, keep training, keep working, and then go for that team and that spot. And I really, that's great. And I hope everyone listens to that, because there's a lot of people that may not be in, especially with this COVID. This could have been someone's senior year, right? Or their junior year, where it's really important to get those times to get accepted into a program. And
I
so,
think there will be a lot of people who will actually consider a gap year this year because there is uncertainty about whether campuses are going to be open, and are people going to be willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars for doing online classes when they might want to wait a year anyway. So maybe that could be one small benefit of how this is all played out.
yeah, for sure, I could see that. So I've always thought you made it look easy. Was it easy?
There have been times when it's been a lot easier than others. The last couple of years, 36, 37, maybe even 35, I had to work a lot harder during a race. Like I started feeling the pinch after 300 or 400 meters, and I was grinding the whole rest of the mile. Whereas back in the day, I would only ever really feel it with about 300 meters to go. So it makes me appreciate those awesome experiences I had. And I always tried to race in a way that I felt like I needed to save my energy to the end of the race, and I would run my best times when I did that. And um, so I'm appreciative and frustrated at how much harder it has become, but it makes me look back fondly at the times when I ran my lifetime PRs of 329, like cruising through the 800-meter split in 152, feeling like, man, I haven't even gotten going yet. That's sort of an out of body experience right there. And now going through them too flat feels like I'm on a death march. I'm already in the hurt box 300 meters into the race, you know. So yeah, there have been times, but it's never been through a whole season. It's normally like most of my career, there's been a 2 or 3 week window where the marriage of the endurance training, the huge block of work that I do most of the year, and then the fine tuning of the sprint training and the tapering sort of lines up perfectly, where my legs feel like they've got all of the spring in the world like a sprinter, but I've still got all of the aerobic reserves from the endurance training. But that runs out really quickly, because once you do the speed too long, then you're too far removed from the endurance training. And when you're in the heavy endurance training, your legs feel like bricks. So um, it doesn't feel like that for the early season races, but that's pretty magical when everything lines up. And yeah, it's fun to go back to YouTube and watch some of those races.
You mentioned the hurt box. I want to end or start to wind this down on the hurt box. What does that mean? Some people have it, some people don't. Some people are willing to go there, some are not. How important is that? Explain that process, not just in a race, but also you got to do that in training sometimes, right?
Running is the hardest sport in the world, in the sense that, and it's the most painful sport in the world because it's a choice. I played rugby for 9 years. We didn't have any protective gear. I got concussed a couple of times, got hit pretty hard a few times. It may not be the same as how an American football guy gets hit when he does a slant route and the lineman just takes him out. But those don't hurt as much because you haven't chosen that pain. It just happened out of the blue and you deal with it after the fact. Running, you know it's going to hurt, but you're choosing to take yourself into that zone. And I truly believe that a lot of people in society don't have that willingness to they like go up to the discomfort. Oh, I'll just stay right there, or maybe I'll drop back a bit. But there's something crazy about us runners where we actually, we deep down yearn to get into that, and we get addicted to that feeling. And probably a little less than I used to enjoy it. But I think most of us have already gone through that test, and if we choose to call ourselves runners, we that's why we have this shared camaraderie with runners all over the world, because we understand what we've all been through, whether you're from Kalamazoo or Timbuktu or everywhere in between. We each have that common bond that we've put ourselves through the grind, both in training and in races, and you'll never really make it as a runner if you're not willing to do that.
That's why a guy from Ohio State and a guy from University of Michigan can be friends.
Hey, you came and stayed with us in New Zealand. We've done a lot of stuff together. So,
so all right, take it easy on me. This is the last question. Have pity. If you had to race me today in my current shape, who would win?
You're looking pretty strong in the upper body right now. I'd have to make sure I go out to lane 4. Make sure you don't hit me with those elbows. I bet you'd still have me over 100 because I'm still doing the endurance training. I've lost some of that explosive speed. So off the line, you might have me for the first 60 meters, but anything over that, I probably got you.
I think 60 might be a stretch. I don't know. Maybe I might be able to get you for 60.
When you don't train, your fast twitch ratio goes back to 50-50, whereas when you're training, it's like 80-20 or whatever it is. So sitting on the couch makes you a faster sprinter than doing distance training.
Let's hope no sprinters just heard that. I heard I'm supposed to sit on the couch.
But yeah, no, I'm glad I'm still running, because part of the reason why I still am is like the fear of like, will I still be? I know I will always go for runs, but will I still do the drills and the stretches and the things that make my body feel like it's an amazing feeling when you're in peak fitness, not from the aerobic capacity, but your legs just move so effortlessly, and like the range of motion, all of that sort of stuff. But it takes a lot of work to get your body into that fine tuning. But racing's the only thing that forces you to stick to all of those 1 to 5%ers. But when you are in that zone, it does feel amazing. And I do appreciate that at this stage in my life still.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest part about running, in my opinion, is just getting started, honestly, get
out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. But once you're there, it's hard, but it's actually 10 times easier, right? So, well, hey man.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I love running. I love running with one other guy, just chatting about life. That's my that's what keeps me alive at the moment. Like, it really feeds my soul, and I love chatting about the real life stuff going on. And when you have one other buddy to do that with, I think running is a great mechanism to do that. So that's what will keep me running for a long, long time.
I completely agree. And there's a lot of bonding and relationship building that goes on when you're doing something like that. And it is a special time. And so, but I want to say, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. Your advice is great. So many people look up to you. You're an inspiration, not just in the US, but in New Zealand, but across the world, around the world. To be able to hear advice from someone who's been on the Olympic podium.
Columbus, Ohio.
What'd you say?
Even in Columbus.
Even in Columbus. Yep. We trust me. We still look up to you, man. So, hey, I appreciate it. It was a great interview, and I'm looking forward to catching up some more later.
Yeah, let's set that up with our old training crew.
Sounds good, man. Hey, you guys have a good night.
Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Bye, man.